these are very interesting times for the economy. We will be discussing the first 9 months of the year, probably first 10 months of the year. How is the economy doing? Finance Minister is set to read his budget in 2 weeks. We have also had very interesting discussions with the IMF team. A staff team came to Ghana early October for their 5th review. The Ghana officials, led by the Finance Minister, were also in Washington for the annual IMF meetings. So with all of this, we also have a new country rep for the IMF in Ghana. So we'll be speaking to him about where Ghana's economy is and also expectations ahead of the budget and how the IMF team's 5th review is likely to go and whether you are feeling the economic reforms in your pocket. Stay with us.
When malaria strikes your home, it strikes everything. No more endless worry because of malaria. Fight malaria back with Vegetem. Vegetem is effective, safe, and fast-acting against malaria. Vegetem tablets stays effective right to the very last tablets. Vegetem is also available in suspension for children. Vegetem, tough on malaria, easy on you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the winner, President and Chair of the Board of the Trade Finance Bank of Africa, Afri-Exim Bank, Professor Benedict O. Rama.
In navigating financial challenges in our region for sustainable development, when we look at challenges, we also know that challenge is one side of a coin. You have challenges, we also have opportunities. And that is why Afri-Exim Bank has grown the fastest in times of crisis. I also thank organizers for considering me worthy of this prestigious award, which I will cherish all through my life.
The Africa Prosperity Champions Awards APCA and Presidential Gala Dinner unites visionaries from heads of state, business leaders, social change makers to innovators to celebrate African excellence in order to encourage a new generation of leaders. More than an awards ceremony, this event declares that Africa's narrative is one of triumph and prosperity. We celebrate a new story where African solutions guide us forward. Each honor exemplifies the vast potential of our continent. The 4th edition of the Africa Prosperity Champions Awards and Presidential Gala Dinner takes place on February 6, 2026 at the Kempinski Gold Coast Hotel in Accra, Ghana. To attend, you may contact +233 536 09 8325 or send an email to protocol@africaprosperity.network. You may also visit africaprosperitynetwork.com for your tickets now.
Kwame and his uncle are almost here.
Wait a minute. This one too, your friend Kwame.
Wait, Kwame. As in the same Kwame again?
Yes, Mommy.
I'm the second coming. Into all this tension just to reintroduce that broke boy from Kaswa.
Why would you deceive the family like this again?
Now I understand the whole delay. Troll from Kaswa. Why wouldn't he be late? Or be late, of course.
Coffee be the luckiest. Coffee from Georgia be luckiest. From not the block, she be luckiest. Me and you coffee be luckiest. No matter why you're lucky. Everybody go be that luckiest.
That's Kwame!
Send your God the apple boom. If you put it toy, so would the coming of the Son of Man be. Is that his car?
Everywhere.
Dial *712#. Choose your ticket. Enter your lucky number. Follow the prompts and let destiny handle the rest.
This promotion is regulated by the NLA on the Caritas platform.
Welcome back. So it's an economic heavy month entering November as the finance minister prepares to read the 2026 budget. He does that in exactly 2 weeks. Tonight, we're looking at the economy. Let me start off, before I even introduce my guest, by showing you a few charts that seem to suggest the country is on the right path. So as you know, the Bank of Ghana releases what it calls a summary of economic and financial charts. The latest release was for September 2025. So this was the month before October. And they would typically group these charts into thematic areas. So the first one they look at is the interest rates. And of course, interest rates give a sense of credit availability, particularly to the private sector. And so if you look at that, they have about 5 of them. The monetary policy rate, Ghana has cut its monetary policy rate by over 650 basis points if you look at the past 4 announcements. So it's quite big cuts. And these things are cut because the central bank sometimes wants to free up money in the system. So they use these interest rates to determine liquidity in a very interesting way. If they find there's too much money in the system, there's a way in which they raise the rate, and they can cut the rate to allow banks to lend more so people can have access to credit. Now, if you look on those charts carefully, you notice that they are all trending downwards. These charts begin from the 2023 January, so these are like a 2.5-year charts, all the way to July 2025. So if you look on these charts, monetary policy rate is trending downwards, and you can notice the big drop from 2025. The Ghana reference rate is also generally trending downwards. Average lending rate, which is supposed to be how the banks react to this rate, is also trending downwards quite nicely. 2023 January, and we use 2023 because 2022 was where everything went crazy. We're kicked out of international capital markets, and we didn't have access to money from abroad. Inflation was in the upwards of 50s. So if you look at average lending rate, which is in your top right corner, 2023 January was above 35%. That's very, very high. We've seen a drop to around 23%. So that's not too bad. So they are trending downwards. Of course, private sector wants interest rates to be lower. So this is a good chart. So if you see these things trending downwards, it's positive, right? Interbank rates as well, generally trending downwards. You can see that big drop from around January 2025. All right, that suggests the new government and the policies they're taking. T-bill rates as well also trending down. We'll talk about T-bills later because it seems as if for a long time the government has been focused on raising a lot of money from the 1 year, 3 month, 9 month sort of window. Whether that's good or bad, we don't know. The next area to analyze the economy will obviously be inflation and exchange rates, right? And again, if you look at these charts, inflation is trending downwards. That's very positive, actually. As I said, in 2022, around September, inflation was terrible, over 55%. In fact, food inflation was close to 60%. So if you look at all the inflation measures, year on year, monthly, they are all trending downwards nicely. In fact, for the first time since 2021, we have what is called single-digit inflation, right? Great stuff. Now, the other point is the charts in the middle, the exchange rates. Again, because Ghana is a small open economy, a lot of times our vulnerability to foreign currency is a big issue. The cedi has depreciated since records started, but at least for the first 6-7 months of this year, it has appreciated. In fact, almost 35% appreciation on average if you compare this to previous years. So if you look at the cedi as well, it's held its own pretty well in the first few months of this government's administration. So the exchange rates to the cedi, to the dollar, cedi to pound, cedi to euro, all seem to be moving to the same direction, although people say stability is what we want, not just appreciation or depreciation. So again, on the exchange rates and the inflation rate side, Ghana seems to be doing the right thing. Now, there's this very interesting chart they call high-frequency economic indicators, because generally economists believe that we need to have things reflecting the real economy. So it's not just inflation and rates. They want to use other indicators to measure whether we are growing, all right? So there's something called the Real Cumulative Index of Economic Activity, real CIEA. That's supposed to trend upwards. It seems to be trending upwards, although you notice it trended down immediately into 2024. So first quarter 2024. So last part of 2023, 2024, it came down, but it's sort of trending upwards a bit. And then they have what they call retail sales and domestic VAT collection. In most countries, consumption is important. Government spending, investment, and consumption is critical. So if people are spending and buying, it tells you the economy is doing the right thing. Although government expenditure itself is not necessarily rising that much. If you look at the first half of the year, government didn't spend as much as it said it would. And this was worrying because a lot of the money they should have spent on capital expenditure, they did not. That's also something else. They also have something they call port activity, which is going up. We don't know whether this is import activity or export, but port generally going up. Passenger arrivals going up, always good. Tourism, foreign exchange comes in. Cement sales as a proxy for building. Cement sales fluctuating. SNIT contributions also going up. Let's do the last group of charts. That's called the monetary development. Monetary development. So generally in an economy, I'm sure you know the difference. The fiscal is what the tax people and the finance ministry do, spending and collecting your money. Monetary developments have more to do with those who print money and also determine the availability of money to the banking sector and the rest of it. And that's a very interesting picture. My guest is an expert on monetary policy, so maybe he will explain to me what these charts mean. But it seems as if generally everybody agrees that Ghana's economy is on the right path. The other point is that we are an IMF program, and we went to the IMF in May 2023. And this program was to give us a little above $3.2 billion US credit, a facility to help stabilize the economy, to put us on the right path. We've done 5 reviews so far, and things seem to be going well. So one of the things I'll be asking my guests tonight is, what do these IMF programs try to do? Are we on the right path? What are the measures? What indicators show that we are doing well? And beyond the program, do we have the right foundation to actually grow as an economy? These are some of the questions we'll be asking our guests. So let me introduce him. Dr. Adrian Alter, the IMF resident rep for Ghana. Welcome to the show. Good evening.
Good evening, Bernard. Pleasure to be here tonight, and thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. And where are you originally from, by the way?
So I'm Romanian.
Okay.
But the past 12 years I spent in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And prior to that, I was studying in Europe. I studied in Germany and Switzerland before moving from Romania.
Interesting. You know, we are football fanatics. So the 4 countries you just mentioned, we could be a football group at the World Cup. Ghana, Germany, Switzerland, and Romania. I don't know if Romania has qualified for the World Cup, though.
It's not yet, and since Georgi Hagi has not qualified to many World Cups.
So since Georgi Hagi left, you need a new good player.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
Indeed.
So you've been to Africa a few times, haven't you?
Indeed. So basically, prior to moving to Ghana, I was covering the entire region as leading the regional economic outlook.
Okay.
And as a desk economist, I started with Tunisia in the north.
Okay.
Then I spent some time in Congo and in Semak, in Central Africa, and then in Lesotho in the south.
Okay.
And last year I came here for the third review.
Okay.
So I was part of the.
You're part of the third review team. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. Ghana is the gateway to Africa, so it's always better to come to Ghana first. So you're welcome. What does the resident rep do? If they say somebody's a resident IMF rep, what's their job?
So the resident representative typically in a country is the primary liaison between the IMF, the authorities, the government, and the main stakeholders, development partners, private sector, civil society, and the media. In particular in Africa, in Ghana, for instance, the RES rep has, let's say, 3 main objectives. First is to monitor the economy and to be the liaison with the government. Second, to be a trusted advisor to the government and the central bank, the BOG, on important specific structural reforms and issues.
Okay.
And thirdly, to manage the IMF office in Accra.
Okay.
Basically dealing with the local staff, hiring staff, managing the staff, and the office here.
So it's a full-time job. And when did you come to Ghana to assume this position? How long have you been here?
So I basically started in September, officially on the 2nd of September 2025, but I arrived a few weeks prior to that, just a couple of weeks before.
So you've done 2 months physically here, but because you were part of the third review team, you've been familiar with the Ghana story prior to coming, correct?
Indeed. So I spent about 3 months, if you think in total, given the time on the review mission.
Yeah. Wonderful. So this current program is in its second year, I guess, right? Because we started in May 2023. So we are 2.5 years into the program.
Indeed.
And the program ends 2026.
Indeed.
So it's a 3-year program.
Indeed.
Typically, how many reviews are done in the length of a 3-year program?
So typically you have 6 reviews.
6 reviews.
So we have just, let's say, completed the first stage of the 5th review, which was the visit here by the IMF staff. The IMF and the Ghanaian authorities have reached the staff level agreement. That's kind of the first milestone in completing the review. Now the team in DC is finalizing the report, which is going through a review process and eventually is submitted to the board. The board for the 5th review is expected in mid-December, and if everything goes well, 380 million equivalent dollars will be disbursed to the Ghanaian government. And
so that will be the 5th tranche of monies to be paid over the 3-year period.
Indeed. Indeed. And that brings the total to about $2.8 billion dollars dispersed so far. And basically, there is one last tranche for the 6th review, which is expected to take place next year.
And this is a credit facility. That means it's a loan. But it's a concessionary loan, correct? That means it's not at market rate.
Indeed. Indeed. So interest rates are much lower, close to zero actually.
Okay.
If you compare that with non-concessional rates, what Ghana would borrow currently, which would be at the tune of 8-10% on the international markets, it's likely to be much better for the government.
I'm still asking very general questions without going into the specific program. So these loans that IMF gives countries, are they tied to specific projects, or they are generally just budget support? Or does it depend on the program? How does it work? If IMF gives you 3 billion, do you tell them what you want to do with it, or they tell you what to do with it?
So in general, the current program is for budget support.
Okay.
There are no projects attached.
Okay.
Other programs that the IMF has are, for instance, for BOP needs, and basically
balance of payments.
Balance of payments, exactly. Okay. So rebuilding the reserves. And there are also some programs like the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, which are specifically tailored for building buffers for climate shocks or pandemic shocks.
Okay. So it really depends on what took the country to IMF for the loan. That will then determine which areas of usage that the loan will be used for. So in this specific case, it's all the 3 billion for budget support. All the 3 billion for budget support. But what does budget support mean? Because not everybody listening is an economist. When you say budget support, what does it mean?
Basically, the money gets disbursed to the government, and the government, because once it had the debt restructuring taking place, it's a bit more challenging for the government to borrow. So essentially, it's a financing facility, and that comes I think it comes with a catalytic role, and it brings financing from other sources, for instance, from other development partners, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and so on. And those are not always for budget support. They are most of the time project-based. And that's kind of the to distinguish between an IMF loan and the World Bank facility.
So World Bank will usually do programs, projects, maybe directly into education or energy sector, but the IMF budget is broad. So the government may decide which aspects of its budget needs strengthening.
Exactly. It's not
earmarked.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Because the Minister of Finance is going to read the budget in 2 weeks, and which means that this 385, if it does come in, could be part of his revenue streams that he will use for certain things. But you don't tell him whether to use it for a road or for a school. He decides based on which part of the budget needs the blocking, correct?
Exactly.
That's how it works.
Exactly.
All right. We're talking to Adrian Alter, Dr. Adrian Alter, is an IMF resident rep, and we're just basically trying to get a sense of the man. I know there are different kinds of economists, right? So what area of economics are you interested in personally?
So my background is basically built on extensive experience in monetary policy, foreign exchange management, debt sustainability, and financial stability.
Can you go through that again? Monetary policy, foreign
exchange management, FX management.
Okay.
Debt sustainability and financial stability. And I have previously worked before joining the fund at the European Central Bank and the Deutsche Bundesbank.
Oh, wow. It seems as if they look at your area of interest and they match it to a country's needs. because when I look at the things you just mentioned, they look like priority needs for Ghana. Monetary policy, obviously. Forex management, historically, yes. That is what brought us all here, right? And then financial stability. So, of course, every economist at the IMF level, at your level, must know a lot of things. But I think it's quite interesting, the coincidence of your interests with the situation that Ghana is in. Did you think that the board considered that in appointing in appointing you, because they felt like these are priority areas for Ghana too, correct?
Indeed, but I wasn't appointed by the board. You know, I was basically recruited by the previous mission chief, Stéphane Roudet.
Okay.
And the management of the African department. So.
Okay, so that's Dr. Selassie.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I see. So when you came to Ghana, I came with Stéphane Roudet.
Exactly.
Okay, but now there's a new gentleman that led the fifth review.
Yes, his name is Ruben Atoyan. He is my new mission chief.
Ruben Atoyan. It sounds Turkish. Am I correct?
He's not Turkish. He's Armenian.
Slash
Russian.
Forgive me. All right. So when I started, I put a few things out. This is September data. From a layman's point of view, they seem okay. All right. But so let me ask you, what's your impression when you take a snapshot of Ghana's economy? Where is Ghana's economy? Are we doing well? Based on what I saw, it looked like we were, but I don't know. What do you say?
So. Let me say from the onset that Ghana has made notable progress in economic recovery. If you look at the key economic indicators, inflation has eased from, as you mentioned, 54% to 9.4% in September 2025. And that's the first time we have single-digit inflation in the past 4 years. And that is also within the band of the BOG. Then if you look at external balances, they also improve significantly. If you look at the international reserves, are now in the tune of 3 to 4 months of import coverage. And then these are basically these are important and clear positive signs. However, the full benefits of stabilization are still to be seen by the population and by the businesses on the ground. I think it still takes time for these effects to trickle down to the people, the Ghanaians on the ground.
So generally, the numbers will look good, and then if it is sustained, people will feel it. Is that how it happens everywhere else? So generally, the numbers will stabilize and look good, and then maybe after how long? A year, 2 years? When will people start feeling it? That's, I think, the question a lot of people ask.
Well, I think most of the effects, the stabilization effects, have already taken place. You know, if inflation comes down, then prices will stabilize. If the currency appreciates or stabilizes, again, goods, imported goods will feel cheaper. What it needs now is basically incomes to catch up, and thus, therefore, if you want, the purchasing power of the people will rebound after this shock and years of efforts.
In Ghana, we make a lot of noise about single-digit inflation. I'm not sure. I mean, these are very high numbers, and generally, Africa has higher inflation figures than developed countries. Why is it important for inflation to be a single digit? Because it seems to be some number that economists look at. Why is single digit so important?
So the single digit inflation and inflation within the target band of the BOG basically means that the prices are well behaved. Businesses and people can forecast them much easier. And then on top of that, prices are linked to other economic parameters. For instance, increases in tariffs or increases in the benefits of the people that receive them. So in a nutshell, I would say if the economy is going well, as is the case for Ghana now, growing at 6%, plus in the first half of the year, and inflation at 9%, then you have about 15%, let's say, nominal growth. So you would expect that businesses will have an increase of about 15% in their revenues. But you know, what we have seen in real terms is that some sectors of the economy are doing better than the 6%. For instance, some of the services, agriculture sector. So those are even exceeding the average that you are seeing. So in theory, those businesses will do better and will have higher profits than the common company.
So you said something about the source of growth. So generally, services and agri seem to be growing faster than manufacturing. But you know that for countries to really develop, manufacturing base is important. Also, sometimes the labor intensity of growth is very critical. So a lot of times people say the economy is growing, but we can't feel it, right? So how important is it for us to trace those sources of growth to make sure that they are income increasing or they are from the right sources, right? Beyond the figure of 4% growth or whatever. How critical is it to look at those sources? And is there a right balance for growth for it to really free up the country?
So the team has estimated potential growth for Ghana at about 5% in real terms, okay? Now, the fact that we are now above potential at 6%, it's basically a good signal. It means that the economy is recovering strongly from the past underperformance, if you want. And with this rebound, you would expect more jobs to come into the economy. And with the stability of the macro stability, you would expect more investments to flood the economy. So hopefully that will generate more jobs, more revenue.
Interesting. We're speaking to Adrian Alter, who's the resident rep for IMF in Ghana, just feeling out what the economy looks like. Don't forget the finance minister will be presenting his budget in a couple of weeks, and we'll be doing many interviews in the build-up to that. Hopefully the minister himself will be here immediately after he reads the budget to explain himself to you. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll look at some of the key benchmarks the IMF gave for the program. How well are we doing on those benchmarks? And then we'll also address issues around fiscal responsibility and some of those big terms that economists like throwing about. This is the point of view. Stay with us.
This tote pays 3 salaries. This book keeps 2 children in school. This cream supports 5 households. Every product creates a job.
Afro-quality. Buy African, build Africa.
Kwame and his uncle are almost here.
Wait a minute. This one too, your friend Kwame.
Wait, Kwame. As in the same Kwame again?
Yes, mommy.
I'm the second coming. Into all this tension just to reintroduce that broke boy from Kaswa.
Why would you deceive the family like this again?
Now I understand the whole delay. Troll from Kaswa. Why wouldn't he be late? Or be late, of course.
Star 712 hash, star 712 hash. Kofi be the luckiest. Kofi from Georgia be luckiest. From Natepia, cause she be luckiest. Me and you Kofi be luckiest. No matter why you're luckiest. Everybody go be the luckiest.
God, Kwame!
Send your God the apple boom. If you put it toye, so would the coming of the son of man be. Is that his car?
Everywhere.
Dial star 712 hash. Choose your ticket. Enter your lucky number. Follow the prompts and let destiny handle the rest.
This promotion is regulated by the NLA on the Caritas platform.
When malaria strikes your home, it strikes everything. No more endless worry because of malaria. Fight malaria back with Vegetem. Vegetem is effective, safe, and fast-acting against malaria. Vegetem tablets stays effective right to the very last tablets. Vegetem is also available in suspension for children. Vegetem, tough on malaria, easy on you.
Welcome back. The point of view tonight is heavy on economy. We're trying to break it down so it doesn't get too complicated. Luckily, we have the IMF resident rep who has been in Ghana for just 2 months. He was part of the team that came for the 3rd review, and now he's the guy in charge of the Ghana operation. And don't forget, the Minister of Finance and the Governor just came back from Washington for what they call the annual meetings. This is after the 5th review team also left. So it's like they come, we go. And he's here dealing with all of those. I had a final question on inflation. I remember when inflation was rising in 2022, there was this sort of debate about whether it's supply side or demand side. And I remember people criticized the central bank at the time for trying to use its monetary policy rate to try and control inflation that was not of its doing. Because a lot of people believe that the inflation was a supply side fiscal deficit inflation type. When you look at our single digit inflation that was shown, is the 9.4 consistent with other indicators? And does this prove that a lot of the inflation was from the supply side and not the demand side?
Thank you, Bernard. So let me say a few words. In general, in Africa, what we have seen is that exchange rate plays an important role for determining inflation.
Okay.
So in 2022, you had a steady depreciating, maybe 50 to 100% per year rate. And that basically translates, typically the pass-through to inflation is about 20%. So if you have 100% depreciation, you will have 20% inflation.
That's what's called imported inflation.
Only from the imported goods.
Imported inflation.
Now, let's go back to 2025, okay? Inflation came down from about 24% to 9.4 in September. We are waiting for the number for October coming this week. So now a few things have changed relative to 2024. So there is a bit of base effects there. One, on the supply side, last year you had the drought, and that impacted massively food prices.
Yes, please.
So most of the inflation last year was driven by food prices. The other component was the exchange rate. The exchange rate was depreciating last year, while this year is appreciating. So that's for the imported goods. And then when you look at other issues, for instance, fiscal discipline, this year is much better by the current government than the spending last year, and that basically helps as well to shrink this gap and to basically address the issue of inflation.
The BOG cut its monetary policy rate by 650 basis points if you check its past 3 announcements. That's very big. Yeah. The steepness of the curve I showed within a short period of time, is that troubling at all, or is that okay if you look at, if you consider everything else?
So if you look at the inflation, inflation itself came down quite abruptly. So the fact that the BOG decided to cut rates from a very high level, 28%, I think, in March, to the current level is 21.5.
Yes.
So it's about, you mentioned 650 basis points.
Yes.
Indeed,
yeah.
Right. But what you need to take into account is also real interest rates. So real interest rates now are were significant before they start cutting, and therefore with higher than historical averages of real interest rates, you need to bring them back to the historical average.
Please take me to the monetary, take me to the interest rate chart, not this one. I just wanted to show viewers what I was saying. Yeah, so I was basically saying that this is very steep drop. This is a very steep drop, right? From 28, I think it's much lower even now, right? This is very steep drop, one of the steepest we've seen. And of course, these people expect this to much lower as well. So you're saying that it's still okay. We are still okay.
What the IMF team advised the BOG is to keep a prudent monetary policy in order inflation expectations to re-anchor at the single digits. So you need to keep monetary policy tighter than usual to have these expectations re-anchor in the monetary policy band.
Interesting. All right, now let's talk about the fifth review. What we were told after the team came was that Ghana is on track. All right? But there are many things you look at. So what are the key benchmarks for you to arrive to say a country is on track? Is it 3 things? Is it 4 things? What are the key bullet points of knowing that this country is on track?
Well, obviously, in terms of the review process, I would say all indicative targets, quantitative targets at end June 2025 were met. And that is an important plus. Now, when it comes to structural benchmarks, Ghana has made significant progress, but several key reforms remain essential to secure this long-lasting macroeconomic stability. Think about it like building a house. Okay, Ghana has put a strong foundation and has now the structure of the house. It needs to fix and build the roof while the sun is still shining, and then basically add the doors, the windows, to offer this house to be livable and resilient for future shocks. So let me say maybe 3 main reform areas. First, on the continued fiscal discipline. I think this is important for the country to strengthen how the government manages its finances, boost revenue, domestic revenue, also improve the tax administration, and ensuring that public spending is efficient and transparent. The second important aspect is the energy sector. And the government has renegotiated recently the legacy areas with the IPPs, with the independent power producers, and has taken steps to improve the revenues of the ECG and the cash waterfall mechanism. But this is not sufficient. More work has to be done. Further steps need to reduce the arrears and ensure that financial sustainability of the energy sector is in place. And one last aspect for the state-owned enterprises in general is the governance and transparency. And this comes not only for the energy sector, but for the gold board and cocoa board as well. And then the last point I want to make, last but not least, we have worked closely with the central bank, with the Bank of Ghana, on a revamped foreign exchange operations framework. And this was an important key pillar for the fifth review. Basically, the new framework, which is rules-based, transparent, and objective-oriented, if you want, has three main objectives. First, to continue to rebuild external buffers. Second, to smoothen excessive volatility. And third, to intermediate FX flows that go to the BOG, including through gold board.
Can you repeat those three?
So first,
continue to
rebuild the FX buffers, right?
By that you mean reserves?
Reserves, exactly. Second, to smoothen volatility of the exchange rate. This should be a framework where you have some certain rules, and when volatility exceeds certain levels or the exchange rate movements are not in line with fundamentals. And then the third one is on the intermediation of the FX flows, including those that are going through gold board.
So is this framework being implemented as we speak, or it is now being put in place? The framework, is this something that we already are using, or something we are considering? I just want to understand that.
Together with the BOG, we are still working on the final details, and hopefully the board of the BOG will
the board of the bank of the fund.
No, the board of the BOG
will approve.
Will approve it. This was an important milestone for the fifth review.
But before that framework, the BOG is already managing FX.
It does.
And
yes,
the currency has appreciated quite well. So my thought is, even before the framework, they seem to be, because don't forget the biggest problem in Ghana, or second biggest after inflation, was FX. And indeed, you showed the relationship, right?
Yeah.
So if between January, February, and now, the cedi has appreciated, I think, 35% against the dollar, things seem to be working, right? Why do we still need a new framework?
So basically, the new framework tries to make things more transparent, and the auctions that the BOG has to the market participants be more market neutral, such that the interbank market starts to work by itself without any interventions.
I see. So which means that when the framework is in place, it will prevent or expose excessive intervention if there is anything like that. As in, because I do know that when, again, basics economics, when you're doing what you call a flexible exchange rate regime, you allow the market forces to play, but the central bank does intervene as and when necessary. Exactly. This is what the theory tells us.
Exactly. exactly. So we will still have flexible exchange rate, and that's basically our main policy advice.
Yeah, and not to preempt the board, I just want to understand for the public sector, the public, will that have a number? So, for example, will you say X percentage intervention is too much? Do you know what I'm saying? Is there a way? Will the framework tell us if the governor allows $10 billion, pumps that into the market, would that be too much? Is there a figure we can use? Is it quantitative?
Yeah.
Or it will have to be.
I don't want to front run the BOG board.
Okay.
You know, once the board approves this revamped FX operations framework, perhaps they will put a press release and they will
which will have the details.
The details of those operations.
Yeah. Yeah, because the FX is a big issue, of course. But generally, the bank will the fund will agree with the building up of reserves, because I think the country, even prior to this administration, had been using a lot of its gold proceeds to build up its dollar reserves, and I think they started using it in the first part of the year, which seems to have strengthened the cedi. That generally is something the fund is not opposed to, correct? Generally.
I would say, if once it is done through transparent and under a governance framework, and not through quasi-fiscal activities and other issues, I think that could work well.
Wonderful. So back to the quantitative targets, generally by June. Cool. Structural benchmarks, by which you mean more long-term institutional reform type of things. You say that there is still some work to be done. You mentioned the energy sector. I just want to know, because as we speak, right, the energy parastatals are asking for more tariffs. All right. So I'm not sure if how well is the energy sector doing based on your review? What did you see in the energy sector that made you believe that we're on the right path? Because when you listen to Ghanaians watching the Public Accounts Committee talk to ECG, for example, and they talk about the amount of money they spent beyond approvals, a lot of people are not happy, and they're asking for 250% increase. So when you say generally the energy sector reform seem to be right, I want you to put a bit of flesh on that for me.
Yeah. So for the energy sector, I would mention maybe three aspects. One, it's on the ECG side. ECG's revenues have increased quite substantially compared to last year.
Okay.
That is both because of better transparency, the effect of tariffs, and better collection. Okay. Second, the implementation of the cash waterfall mechanism this year has been much better and in a more transparent manner. The IPPs are now paid more regularly. Also, the fuel suppliers as well, and the arrears accumulated this year are very limited, if none. And thirdly, the renegotiation of the arrears, of the past arrears, which was conducted by the government this summer, is an important milestone, I would say. That is a reset for the industry.
Permit my ignorance as a non-energy expert. It seems to me as if the power sector has accumulated debts also because of what I would call FX losses. Or let me explain that. So if I am an independent power producer who buys fuel in dollars to power my plant, and because of the currency depreciation, the time I'm supposed to pay back, the tariff is collected in cedis. So maybe when I did the arrangement, it was 6 cedis to the dollar, but now I'm supposed to pay 12 cedis to the dollar. It throws me off. So my point is that, will the reform also include some optimal power mix, which reduces the nation's exposure to, say, foreign fuel. Do you understand me? Because if you want to really strengthen the power sector, a lot of the debts are there not just because of mismanagement, but because if you sign an agreement and the currency depreciates, do you understand? So do you have any benchmark around an optimal power sector mix, which then reduces our vulnerability to foreign exchange volatility?
So let me start from the big picture. Basically, hydro is about 40-50% of the energy production, okay? But this hydro power varies across the year, depending on the season. Now, what is left is basically fuel-based energy. What the IMF team has continuously advised the government is to have a pecking order for these fuels, to choose the cheapest ones and to prioritize the cheapest fuels such as gas and others at the expense of liquid fuel, which is much more expensive. And I think the strategy of the current government is to become more independent, gas producing independent. And that is an important milestone, I think. If they could manage to ramp up domestic production of gas, then they could potentially make substantial savings with fuel purchases.
Wonderful. We'll take a breather. When we come back, we'll wrap up with some very interesting things around fiscal responsibility and domestic revenue mobilization. That's always a big one. This is the point of view. Tonight we're talking economy. My guest is Dr. Adrian Alta, IMF resident rep. First time resident in Ghana, first interview. Hope you're enjoying it. Stay with us.
Uncle are almost here.
Wait a minute. This one too, your friend Kwame.
Wait, Kwame? As in the same Kwame again?
Yes, Mommy.
I'm the second coming. Into all this tension just to reintroduce that broke boy from Kaswa.
Why would you deceive the family like this again?
Now I understand the whole delay. Troll from Kaswa. Why wouldn't he be late? Or be late?
Of course.
Star 712 hash, star 712 hash. Yeah, you go feel the luckiest. Coffee from Georgia be luckiest. From Natepia, cause she be luckiest. Yeah, you go feel be luckiest. No matter why you're luckiest. Everybody go be the luckiest.
God, Kwame!
Send your God the apple boom. If you put it that way, so would the coming of the son of man be. Is that his car?
Dial star 712 hash. Choose your ticket. Enter your lucky number. Follow the prompts and let destiny handle the rest.
This promotion is regulated by the NLA on the Caritas platform.
Welcome back. This is still the point of view. Tonight we're speaking to the resident rep of IMF in Ghana, Dr. Adrian Alta, originally from Romania, studied in Germany, Romania, Switzerland, and the US. He's in Ghana. Very happy to be in Ghana as well. Let's start with the budget. The finance minister reads the budget in exactly 2 weeks, 13th November. Do you have any advice or do you have any recommendations or expectations for the type of budget it should be?
So, in line with the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the IMF has advised the government of Ghana to adopt prudent fiscal measures, basically focusing on maintaining 1.5% primary surplus on the commitment basis.
Okay.
Now, in order to achieve this, basically the government needs to mobilize domestic revenue more efficiently, ensures that the public spending is both targeted and sustainable, especially for priority sectors, including social programs in health and education. The authorities are also advancing on a comprehensive VAT reform, which aims at broadening the tax base and simplifying, streamlining its structure. And that is an important reform by government. If everything goes according to our forecast, we see an improvement in the non-oil revenue to GDP ratio of about 0.6% of GDP in 2026. And I think that would basically be a reflection of the measures, fiscal measures introduced this year that will take the fuel levy, the GSL that haven't taken place for the entire year, but also reforms on the tax administration. And I think those are key to make revenue collection more efficient, to have more and better compliance based on risk management of the GRA.
So while that may be the right answer from the IMF perspective and the government perspective, citizens may be saying, look, we've been in an IMF program since May 2023. We admit that things have stabilized, but the things you're saying about revenue, tax base, seem to suggest that things are, we are not necessarily going to have any reprieve yet as ordinary citizens. It seems as if the tightening is still continuing. And people will say, isn't 2.5 years of an IMF program enough for the taps to be opened again? I think that's the question most Ghanaians will be asking. From what you are telling me, you are expecting further tightening, or at least, if not tightening, the tap will be kept close, if you understand what I'm saying.
No, it's not really closed. I would say fiscal discipline is extremely important after coming from debt restructuring and all the fiscal slippages that happened in 2024. And the audit of the payables is still to be released. But what I want to say is that the government, given the limited resources and given this target of 1.5 primary surplus, will aim to prioritize projects, make things more efficient, spending as well, and at the same time have also some policies that protect vulnerable groups. I would say that has been our focus from the beginning of the programs. Look at the social programs like LEAP, Ghana School Feeding Program, NHIS. All of those are priority for the government spending. So we need to ensure that these benefits that we are seeing with the macro stability are reaching the right people, and continue to adjust these policies such that we can prioritize and spend more on infrastructure, health, and education.
Because when we looked at the figures for half year, expenditure was below target, and a lot of the non-spending was on the investment kind of expenditure. In fact, in June, it was 63% below target. And some people believe that could hamper growth in the future. They did spend what they said they would spend on compensation. Of course, this is just June. I'm not sure the situation in September, but how important is it to have a right balance? Because if you also cut and you are so austere and you don't invest in infrastructure and the type of investment spending that is required for growth, you will get stability but sacrifice future growth. Yeah. Right? So which is the question a lot of people are having when they look at the tightening that we are seeing under Mr. Atuforsen. So what are your comments on that?
So on the spending in general this year, that was also affected by a few factors. First, the audit of the payables last year has put a brake on spending this year because the government didn't know whether those projects were approved legally or not, or they need to cancel them. The second thing is that the introduction of the new Procurement Act has also helped the government to have more checks and balances on how the public money is being spent. So I would say once the audit will be published, maybe the tap will reopen and some of these projects will continue to spend and some of the infrastructure projects will evolve.
There's a big question that everybody asks. We've asked the government, we've asked your boss, Selassie Abebe, about whether the government, at what point the government would want to go back to the international market. Because some people say that's what brought us here in the first place. We went there too aggressively. So is there any of your benchmarks on the program that looks at whether conditions are good enough to go back to those markets? That's number one. And is it something the fund will even recommend at any stage, the idea of going back to the capital markets to expand your pool of resources for a country like Ghana?
Okay, so on the borrowing side, we have advised the government to be extremely prudent, not to go back to same mistakes with excessive borrowing in the past, excessive and expensive borrowing. I think that's an important point. When you have available concessional financing from multilateral agencies like the World Bank, the African Development Bank, etc., and then you have the IMF loan also at concessional terms, you shouldn't go to the international markets where the interest rates currently are extremely pricey. The global financial conditions have eased, but interest rates are quite elevated. And with Ghana's current rating, the borrowing will be around 10%, if not higher. So what you want to achieve on the borrowing side is a mix between domestic and external. On the external, there are clear limits in the IMF program because debt sustainability and the agreement with the creditors put in place those limits. So the government has a mix of about 70% to 30% external, domestic versus external. On the domestic market, we have worked closely with the government to start lengthening the maturity, so go beyond 1 year maturity, which is currently the status quo. And we hope at the start of next year, the conditions to be in place for the domestic bond market to reopen.
There's a lot more we can do, but we don't have enough time. We'll thank you for today. Hopefully, when the budget is read, or maybe when the board does approve the 5th review, we will probably talk again to look at what's left, because the program then would end in May 2026. So there's a lot more time to talk. But I thank you for speaking to us, Dr. Adrian Alter, IMF resident rep for Ghana, in his first interview here in Ghana, and he's been speaking on a wide range of issues regarding the economy. We thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.